They said, why don't you take a few minutes and think of what kind of challenges would arise when Kumbh Mela happens 2 years from now. I mean, I'm a student of science. You could use these tiles to count, to make sense of the crowd movements across Kumbh, and that could be valuable. The better you understand the problem, the better solution you can come up with. I remember in January 2020, I had been reading about this virus spreading in Italy and China. We came up with a process for device to show you a travel history. I don't think you have to be an engineer to, build technology. Next time you pick up another project, you'll be far better, you'll be far more efficient. Don't try to force yourself to build anything, whatever it is.
REVA University presents REVA Podcast.
Welcome to REVA Podcast Series, where we are joined by an exceptional young leader, Nilay Kulkarni, who is at the age of 24. Nilay has already made remarkable strides in the field of technology. Started at the age of 14, you heard me right, at the age of 14, he has pioneered impactful solutions like historic stampede prevention system for the Nashik Kumbh Mela and an efficient contact tracing system during the COVID-19 pandemic. Nilay has also worked as a director of engineering at STOA, to mentoring aspiring innovators through TCS Foundation Digital Impact Square. As a founder of Vitt AI, he's transforming financial research with the power of generative AI. And having worked with the global projects in Serbia and Israel, he brings the wealth of knowledge and inspiration. So we are going to deep dive into Nilay's journey. We are going to find out a lot of inspiration through Nilay's journey. So get ready to get insights through this conversation in the field of technology, innovation, leadership, and education. So let's get ready to hear it from Nilay. I just want to understand your insights in the field of technology, education, leadership, innovations. So a lot of things are there to uncover through your journey, Nilay. But before we start, at the age of 14, okay, so it is just a 14 years old. What sparked you to start something here in the field of technology? Mm-hmm. So what was that one thing?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. It's a lovely day here. So I see. I don't think I planned to be in technology. What happened is I used to be a tinkerer. Very active child. I used to participate in all kinds of competitions in school, computer Olympiad, math Olympiad.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do whatever it is,
Okay.
right? Chess, I played this sport called Mallakham.
Okay.
I've tried archery and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to build science projects,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And I think I wanted to become a scientist when I was in 6th, 7th grade.
Since childhood?
Yeah, so there's this exam called Homi Bhabha Young Scientist Exam in Maharashtra. It's fairly prestigious.
Mm-hmm.
I was a medalist at the final level. So I thought that, this is my...
Of when?
I was in 6th grade.
6th, okay.
It's for 6th and 9th grade students.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought this is what I'll do. I'll become a scientist. I'll study mathematics. I'll study physics, etc. But what happened is I made this tile that generated electricity upon stepping. Okay, I used to build a lot of science-based projects like Newton's cradle to understand laws of Newton. I went to this club called Sunday Science School.
Okay.
So there I used to build all kinds of things, and one of these competitions where I had participated, they had kept a pitching competition for this same Kumbh challenge. Okay. This was back in 2013. I was in 8th grade. I was 13, and they said, why don't the top 5? I was one of the rank holders at that exam, and then they said, why don't you all kind of take a few minutes and think of what kind of challenges would arise when Kumbh Mela happens 2 years from now, 2 years from then, and how will you solve these challenges? There's all kinds of transportation, sanitation, healthcare, etc. Stampedes. How do you solve for these? So then, I had some kind of impromptu babbling that seemed to register very well with the organizers, and it turns out that they were trying to start this movement called Kumbhathon, supported by the Media Lab and TCS and so on. I had no idea, but then they, after that pitching thing, a few days later they called me for a hackathon. I didn't know what a hackathon was. I thought it had to do something with hacking, but I got an opportunity to. They said, just come down, visit us. It's a 4-day residential event, and we'll try to build solutions around Kumbh Mela. And there's MIT scientists coming. You'll see the process of innovation. Blah blah blah. I said, sounds lovely. I had to skip my exams, 8th standard unit test or something, but my parents wouldn't allow. No. What is this event thing you're talking about? At that time, my principal allowed me. She said, "You go. You're doing something unique. You go for this event. We'll conduct your exams later. Don't worry, right?" And that's how I got to sort of be there. I took to get a seat at the table. I was the only school kid there. All college engineering students and these MIT people, coaching and mentoring, similar to the bootcamp we're having downstairs to, come up with ventures, come up with potential solutions for such a grand challenge. And I just I wanted to tinker around. So I sat around, I went around different tables saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? And, I just got engaged with the crowd management, team. And I said, well, how can I help? I'm an 8th grader. I understand. I'm a student of science. Whatever it is, right? I'll research whatever it takes. And we built, we thought about this. I had gone there with a tile that had a dynamo attached to it. So when you stepped on it, it would go down, generate some electricity, and it would light up a small LED bulb. I said, we'll put millions of these, and in Kumbh Mela, I went to Dr. Raskar and said, we'll put millions of these, and that's how we'll power Kumbh Mela. Electricity will generate ourselves. He said,
this was your first solution.
This was what I went with. And he said, this is not, don't think about this, but you could use these tiles to count, to make sense of the crowd movements across Kumbh, and that could be valuable. And so I I sat down with the crowd management team, and I started sort of brainstorming, and we built this little mat that counted people going in and coming out of the dining area. And we said, if we had the ability to put a lot of these in the Kumbh, we'd have a real-time heat map of how the crowd moves, and therefore we'll be able to understand if there are too many people accumulating in a small area,
in one place.
Right? So to avoid these scenarios, we could instruct the police bandobast, the authorities to distribute these people more evenly, and that could reduce the chance of stampedes. So that the idea started taking shape. I mean, sure, it wasn't this elegantly put on day one. We had no idea, but that's kind of where we were headed. And so during this, I said, how do I contribute? I wanted to do anything to not just be at school. I wanted to be with these people because they were talking about solutions. I said.
So was that your driving force towards this?
I mean, probably, right? Because see, I felt like Willy Wonka. One of my favorite movies, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And this crazy guy makes chocolates or whatever. I felt like this is a real world Willy Wonka. You can think of solutions. You can build them and you can put them on feet. How wonderful is that? How wonderful are these people? So whatever it takes to listen to the conversations that these people are having, I'll do. So then it turns out they needed some, we said we'll have some kind of app, we'll have some kind of dashboard, some database. I didn't know what these terms meant, but I just wanted to...
You had a fair idea.
No, it's about information is going to be we'll have to take it from a mat and somehow communicate it with the police. So whatever website, something we'll have to do, some cloud, something we'll have to do. So I said, I'll do that. So it started with Googling, how to make an Android app, how do I write a website and so on. It took some, sleepless nights, but about 6 months later, I could build the end-to-end, very, very basic, but an end-to-end prototype of getting a mat, counting, it sends the data, then it stores it in a database, and then it shows it on a dashboard to a police officer. I said, that was a special moment of realization for me that
So was that you alone who worked on this the entire 6 months?
So the software part is what I worked on. The mat itself that counts people, my project partners were electronic engineering students. So they had some awareness of these sensors and things like that, and the whatever the hardware part of it.
Okay.
And I mean, there's a lot of other work that goes into conceptualization, brainstorming. That those are all collaborative efforts, right? Software, I kind of had to stick it out a little bit, and just to get a prototype. A lot of times people don't want to join you unless you have something going on for yourself, right? So unless you have something to show for it. Later we had people work with us, but
They
for the
trust
first
on you based on something at least.
correct.
What's in it for me?
Correct. So that took some time.
So it's pretty interesting to know like from where it started and how you reached into that place, which is pretty interesting. I want to understand, Nilay, from your side, did you face any challenges in between? I'm sure you must have. So what was those challenges and how did you overcome that?
You mean during the Kumbhathon
yeah,
process? I mean,
this.
sure, there were academic pressures. I was ninth grade is considered quite important. Sometimes it's considered harder than 10th grade and so on. I couldn't or didn't want to go to school as much because this was more interesting to me. I used to, stay up all night coding, and then, I would just not be, it would be too sleepy or sleep deprived to go to school. So that caused a lot of friction at home, at school, and so on. But I think they were, my teachers as well as my parents to some degree were very understanding and supportive. I mean, there were challenges around the product definition, the problem itself, right? There's the process of innovation. When you're doing it for the first time, some parts don't make sense. Why do I have to keep thinking about this problem? Why do I have to study how stampedes? I have an amazing solution. I'll put this mat and it will do all magical things, right? So being able to accept that the better you understand the problem, the better solution you can come up with. You need to have patience. You need to do pilots very frequently. So going through, they were growing pains, right? To understand and learn the process of innovation. There were certain pains associated with that, but growing pains. So I was very grateful. I got to have them quite early on, along with. So the school pressures seem quite. No. I mean, they kind of went together, but it didn't feel. The school thing itself did not feel very overwhelming. Then this. I'm also trying to get the collector to approve my, my innovation. So it was an interesting this thing that you're tackling this, and the next moment you're thinking about your geography assignment. Both problems kind of seem to. To a child, they seem the same.
I could understand at that age, I think school and your attendance and the other things, your exams and all these things would have been the most, that would have been the challenging things for you, right? But
I mean, that was expected that I should take it more seriously, but I happened not to.
But what you just said, I could relate to that. That often when you go and solve the big problems, like it's a pretty big problem, right? You have to solve a lot of small problems, and those small problems at times you feel irrelevant. As you said, that why I need to study about all these things, but you need to do a lot of boring work to make it exciting, right? So that's when this is how you connect all the dots and you create something like that. I want to understand, with such rich background in the tech and innovation, okay, how do you view the role of transforming it to the higher educations?
I mean, I didn't quite get the question.
So it's about your tech background, and as someone with a rich background in the tech and innovation side, so how do you see the role of, like, since you are in AI, generative AI, right? How do you see the role of AI in transforming the higher education in India?
I think one of the biggest availabilities is that now you have this infinitely patient teacher, right?
Okay.
You can ask n number of questions in any in any manner of phrasing. You could ask for it to teach you electromagnetism with analogies from music, or for with analogies from basketball or whatever, and this
Right.
teacher
You can
has
ask anything.
infinite patience with you.
Yeah.
I mean, I still don't think they're anywhere close to actually we are anywhere close to actually replacing the deft hand of a true good teacher, a good professor, right? Nowhere even close to that. But a lot of times the information gathering part, right, is that problem is solved for.
Okay.
So when I was learning how to code, for example, I had to go through a lot of pains to, run into the relevant content, to figure out the process of how do I learn. The first thing you have to, like, as you are trying to learn something, let's say it's software, you also have to figure out how to learn. Learning how to learn was
Yes.
this thing, right? It's
Yes.
still a challenge, but I think it's made much easier. The friction is much less because of tools like V0 and Cursor and ChatGPT and Claude and so on. There's IDEs, or working coding environments that to whom you can ask options and say,
Correct.
for this problem, how do I solve this, and what are my options, and so on. So I think earlier it was very painful to go through the documentation of the technical documentation of the whatever. I mean, you still, to a large extent, you do have to do that, but the initial getting off the ground part of it is much accelerated. So now you can focus on the harder problems.
It helps you to do better research about your subjects.
Yeah, I mean, there's ways to leverage it, right? I wouldn't blindly trust what a model gives me, but a lot of times I might have a large body of text, right, in research, and I am supposed to review it. A lot of times it helps you to distill the relevant points. So a lot of word manipulation, or lot of word-based tasks have become easier.
Correct.
So it can accelerate your process of accounting for more data, right?
Correct.
If you can't read 6,000 pages, you can at least get a sense of what they say,
Few-
right? Like
in few words
in
you can
fewer.
get
So
it.
instead of reading 6,000 pages, you probably would be okay doing 100 pages,
Yeah.
right? Now, so the burden, I think, to some extent is reduced.
Correct. And here I also see a lot of, like, see, your brain you need to use anyways, but you have this researcher or somebody who is researching on your behalf and giving it to you. This is how AI is helping, right? So fine. So you tell me about the second product here, okay, which you did during the COVID-19 crisis, right? So something like a tracing system during COVID-19. So what motivated you to do
Oh man, that's
something on that, like, because it's very efficient. I mean, at that stage, if I have to visualize, it has actually helped a lot. So what has motivated you to take on this particular challenge?
That's an interesting story, because I remember in January 2020, I had been reading about this virus spreading in Italy and China, and a lot of hospitals being overwhelmed and so on.
Yes.
So I started posting online on my social media channels, etc., saying, I want to do something about this, whatever it is. Here's what I can do. I can write such and such kind of code.
It just came to your mind that you want to do something there?
I just said, look, I can't be the real solution only lies with the doctors. Okay, so I can't have any sort of real medical intervention here, but at least I can do something that can reduce the burden on people who are actually there, right? Who can have a direct impact. So I can at least be an assistant, right? So I said, whatever it is, these are my skills, and I would love to do some kind of a project, something that meaningfully helps people. So I started like yelling, do you, or reaching out to some of my friends saying, do you want to do something around this? What do you think? And so some of our, some of the Nashik ecosystem sort of came together. We had a call. Same people as some of the mentors from my Kumbh Mela project. We got together and got together in the sense on call and said, what problems do you think we could solve? And we had someone who worked at the government hospital, the civil hospital in Nashik, also on the call. And so he happened to mention that, getting the travel history of a patient is quite a big challenge. It takes us 2 to 3 days to establish any kind of a timeline, and it's important for us to have that data fast because it can help us predict next hotspots. It can help us plan for pop-up clinics. It can help us send screening teams, etc. So if we had a more reliable and efficient way, because reliability was a problem because the patients wouldn't remember where they had gone. So the process was for about 10 minutes each day for 2-3 days. The medical officer would come to your bed and ask you, 3 days ago, do you remember where you went?
It was completely manual.
Yeah, that is, if I ask you where all you went 12 days ago, how much time you spent there, it's impossible, right? It's 15 days, you can't do that. So we came up with a process for the device to show you a travel history. Right? And this process took about 5 to 10 minutes. And so we built this into an app. And that's the solution, the problem came from the civil hospital. And so we said, what, we can help organize or gather relevant information faster. So we built this app, and we went from this call, we kind of got to work. I happened to put together the first prototype in about a day. We demoed it to the collector. About a day, couple of days, something around that. And on day 3, we went live in Nashik Civil Hospital. By then, we had 4 volunteers. So then we again ramped up our efforts. We took on some more challenges from them.
So how did that particular product help the...
So I'll tell you, see, this process that took 3 days now took 10 minutes. Okay, so this is saving a lot of time, and like especially at a very critical time, right? So your medical officer would now can see your travel history much faster. This again, as I said, is information that is used towards planning pop-up screening processes or pop-up clinics, etc. And to provision for certain drugs, whichever were known to be effective at that time, and so on, right? So what could be the future hotspots, right, emerging, right? So that was because we could establish on a map, right, that many people happen to visit this specific marketplace. Lockdown hadn't happened at that. It didn't happen, right?
Back then in January?
January 31st, 2020 was the first case.
Yes.
Okay. I think Mahakavach, the first prototype was around mid-February or first week February, something like that. So even then, lockdown hadn't happened, right? So people were still kind of traveling, and so we had a lot of international people coming in and visiting marketplaces or visiting temples, because NRIs, right? So they'll probably go to a temple, take darshan, come home, etc. So those hotspots we were able to identify how many people went there, and so maybe the marketplace around that temple might have been. So it helped them plan and provision better. So
awesome.
You saved about like a lot of man hours, work hours for the administration.
That's amazing to see, Nilay, how the problem came and you have worked towards the solution, and the solution has actually worked in the real world environment, right? So many people worked on the products just for the sake of because it interests them, but how you have actually connected your interest toward the real time problem solving, that's really inspiring. from here I want to, jump into your mentorship and leadership side. You have also worked as a director of engineering at STOA, right? And a technical mentor at TCS Foundation's Digital Impact Square. So, what advice would you like to give to the young innovators and the aspiring students to lead in this technology driven fields?
Um, I don't think you have to be a technologist or rather I don't think you have to be an engineer to build technology. At least with some of these tools now, it's
That's a good one. That's
so
a
much,
fresh breathe to so many people who are not doing engineering probably.
Yeah, I mean, don't be overwhelmed, right? With all these toolings, you'll get used to it. Don't worry. I had no background, so to say, as an 8th grader. Nothing on my profile would tell you that I could write code. So believe in that potential. But I think whoever wants to build things, right? I'd encourage them to build, right? To keep building projects, and don't try to. You don't necessarily need to solve for extremely big problems saying I'll take us to Mars, or I'll solve for I mean I'll build the next iPhone, or a lot of times very simple problems that you care about, you could do a very good job at it, right? So it's not necessarily about how big of a challenge you've taken on your shoulders. It's more about can you do a good job at whatever it is that you're doing, right? When it comes to like actually turning it into an enterprise. But if you want to build things, projects, especially when you're young, you're in whatever, I mean, at any age for that matter, feel free to play around, right?
Wow.
Build projects that pull you.
That's amazing.
Right? Don't try to force yourself to build anything, whatever it is, right? I mean, if you care about temples, one of my side projects is to try to restore like ancient sculptures, like a 3D restoration using Gen AI. Now I combine this tech interest with this interest in art history and so on.
Right.
So do things that you care about, right? I grew up in my uncle runs a very popular restaurant in Nashik. So I grew up in that sort of restaurant and business environment. So oftentimes we would build little projects here and there. How can we what can we design a vending machine for pav bhaji, right? Like I went to Japan recently, and there's like amazing, ridiculous vending machines that can serve you hot soup of 50 different kinds. There's a vending machine that can do this, right? Piping hot soup. At 1 a.m. in night, it's giving you a bowl. Amazing. I said, why can't we do this for pav bhaji? Can you have like a steaming hot pav bhaji, like a butter pav? Right? Can we design? I mean, another point is that feel free to play around. This is not, don't always try to be super utilitarian, because sometimes, whatever I'm building, this creates this impact. And I think some of these words are kind of hammered into you and you feel overwhelmed. What is the impact? I don't know. Nobody knows. Even people who might be advising you don't know the impact. I'll give you an example. There was a case where a Japanese bakery, they used to sell these Japanese sweets. Okay. We can call them pastries here, but they're called dango. Okay. So different kinds of sweet. It was a sweet shop, right? Similar to India, we have so many like kaju barfi, katli, etc. A lot of different types of sweets, right? Same thing in Japan. They have very different size, shapes. The rates are, prices are different, etc. Now this bakery had this, or this sweet shop had this problem of recognizing which pastries the person has put on their tray and how to bill for it. It used to take a long time. So they contracted this. They get this. Got this tech company to build a machine or a desk, a POS machine that has an object detection thing. And this is back in the 90s, okay, that does this object detection, visual computer vision stuff to spot the right pastry, bill for it, and so on. And you can add new bakery items without any new training and so on. This is before neural networks were a thing, okay. What happened is this algorithm was later found to be quite effective in some amount of breast cancer screening. X-rays, it worked well on, with some adaptation, it worked well on X-rays of, breast scans, so chest scans. So breast cancer diagnostics was a use case that they...
Taking the same technology.
Same technology, just a little bit of adaptation, right? And that kind of opened me up to this. there's this idea, right? Like sometimes you might end up building a technology that has a completely different use case. As a technologist, feel free to have your ears and eyes open,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
So it's okay if on day one you don't think it's some very big impact, and sometimes you might try to chase a very big impactful project, and you might end up building something very mediocre,
Right.
right? Don't get overwhelmed by the
The pressure
idea
of
that you have to
outcome.
be the next $1 billion, $1 trillion
Correct.
Facebook, and is that even Facebook did not start out saying I'll be $1 trillion
Right.
corporation, right?
True.
It's take it one day at a time.
Right. So I could see the Elon Musk in you. Like, I mean, think about your own idea, think about the crazy idea, and think about the craziest idea, what you have fun doing it. And yes, what you say, Nilay, is totally, making sense. Often people have that pressure of, doing meaningful things all the time, and how long you can do the meaningful things all the time. But when you are creative, when you are having fun, probably the same technology, like as you said, is getting used in something else. You have started with something, but the impact is going in something else. But having fun and being more creative gives you the joy, gives you the freedom to work efficiently on that. At least you are having fun in the journey.
I mean,
This is what you
meaning
wanted
is
to say.
not necessarily in the what, right? It's not necessarily about what you are doing. I think for me, it's the how, it's the process. It's about how you are doing. Meaning is found in
Okay.
how you approach, right? If I do this little thing, right? If it's a small tool, or if it's an enterprise, a company that I want to be very profit making, it's about, do I do a complete job at it,
Okay.
right? If I'm
Okay.
and it translates. I am a firm believer in the notion of how you do anything is how you
Okay.
do everything, right? So if I were a plumber, I would still try to be the most sincere plumber there,
That's
right?
amazing.
That's a
So,
whatever it is, do a good job at it, right?
yes.
It's okay. Be proficient with what you do,
Right.
plan it with, and so I mean, I think especially when you're young, when you're starting out, right, the process of how, if you early on you figure out that, right, instead of trying to chase big challenges, if you
Yes.
try and solve some smaller challenges, but do a really good job at it, do a very complete end-to-end job at it, you pay attention to detail, you do the technology right, you do the communications right, you do your research right, when you've figured out the how, the next, I don't know, you might end up building a company, selling it, or trying to build a company, it doesn't go anywhere, but the
Yeah.
next time you pick up another project, you'll be far better, you'll be far more
Yes.
efficient. You might, you never know, your skills are very useful. You'll never,
Right.
if you approach it with that, this thing, right, instead of trying to get swayed in by how glamorous the project sounds.
Correct. So, how do you see this, Nilay, at the era where we have been talking about why, how big is your why? You are talking about how, right? So, how do you see this? Like, you need to focus on your why, or you need to focus on your how, or maybe you are building up on this?
I mean, it's not a this or that, right? A lot of times when we try to think about the why, it seems like a very ambiguous and very challenging question to answer. Why are you doing this? I mean, it's
Probably you
it's
might
it's
have
very.
not even thought about.
No, I mean, it's good to think. I'm not saying that one takes precedence over the other, but I think it's often easier to control the how. Okay,
Okay.
it is easier in terms of figuring out uh, how well you try to do something, how complete of a job do you try to
Okay.
do. The why part, I think, emerges out of the activity that you are doing, right? Oftentimes you find yourself, or you find your calling as you are doing something. And I think, again, if you first start with a sincere approach, a want to do the best of whatever you can, right, to your best of your abilities, if you keep at that approach, I think it's far easier for you to frame a why at later points. And I'll tell you, I think the why is never a static answer. Okay, it keeps changing every few months. I mean, this events influence
It
the
evolves.
right. So every time you ask someone why, why are you building this company, or why are you in technology, or why you... It's a compilation of their experiences at that time, and then they explain why.
Right.
They're trying to explain in hindsight, they are now compiling why, right? Through some degree, there's a forward-looking aspect saying, how since I do it for whatever goodwill, or I do it for people, etc. I mean, I'll take an example, right? I do it for the impact, and I'll do it for the world, right? I mean, sure, but how, like, for me at least, it becomes difficult to visualize. There's 8 billion people on the planet, right? I say I do it for human impact, but how many of such 8 billion people have I really interacted with, right? Very limited. As a human, I'm limited by this thing. Therefore, it becomes very ambiguous, very vague. The why question is a very nice philosophical discussion, but I think the how is a practical this thing, right? And you should have both.
Right.
It's not a this or that problem, but starting, you can always start. You can control the how.
Correct. So how I see this, like from your answer, just to summarize this, so why is the bigger thing, and if we have to execute something, then the how matters the most, because these small milestones, like how to do this, how to do that, and I think once you complete all your hows, then eventually you reach out to your why, and you can make it more impactful.
Yeah, I mean, it emerges out of, let's say you apply, how you do something, right? So the approach, and it's about, let's say you walk on a path, and how is about like how it is that I walk on this path. How do I, as an entrepreneur, how do I practice, and how do I, pay attention to my customers, or how do I interact with them, and so on. I think along the way, the why emerges. You start slowly realizing yourself that, the other day I really connected with a stakeholder, okay, and that is why. A lot of times the realization, there are moments, right? During our COVID, this thing, we talked to a doctor, and I mean, I did like massive amounts of calls during that time, talking to doctors, medical health officers, and the district health officer, and so on. During that time, someone said, after, because of this process, it has taken some workload off. I was able to find some time to speak to my family, right? I mean, that then I say, oh, this is why I do this, right? Like, I mean, it's that moment. So it didn't start with why this, that, it didn't occur to me at that time. So it's I think, in some sense, in the popular zeitgeist, the popular notion of entrepreneurship and innovation and so on, I think the why is kind of given too much importance in some sense. You'll get to it later. Don't worry about it on day one.
You keep evolving. You keep finding your why, and your why, it just keeps strengthening based on how you do the things.
Precisely.
Right. I want to understand, Nilay, like, how can institutions like REVA University that can empower students to bridge the gap between technical expertise and impactful innovations like this?
I think any kind of ecosystem enabler, right? It could be an incubation center, an institution, like, I mean, an educational institution, and so on. The point is to be a good fertile ground, right? It is to be a good soil, to let the plants flourish, right? So a lot of times, having conviction in what the students are doing and encouraging them goes a long way, right? Because see, these are emergent things. These are emergent outcomes. You can't model for it. You can't necessarily. I mean, sure, there's some frameworks and there's tools to do, design thinking, venture studio, etc. There's those are enablement and process enablement things that you could do. Things like those, giving access to people who have built things from the ground up, right? Just trying to have some interactions with them. Some, in the sense, not surface level interactions, but maybe slightly deeper conversations with them, right? Having interactions, town halls, etc. Things like those go a long way, right? And then obviously backing bold ideas, right? And again, it spans from educational institutes to VCs. Backing that persistent, that sincere, and
Right.
what a innovator or an entrepreneur. It could be in academic research, or it could be in terms of commercial ventures, right? Backing some of the sort of slightly crazier, out there ideas that you might think it may or may not even materialize, right? Being willing to take that chance and being okay with the outcome, saying it's okay.
Even if it is.
Even if it doesn't pan out exactly how it was planned or how it was expected, backing 50, 60, whatever projects, like a certain number of projects, some very interesting patterns will emerge out of it,
Of
right?
course.
Maybe this same innovator who failed at their first attempt, who didn't or rather commercially failed, right, might do excellently in the next attempt.
Correct.
Right? But the fact that someone believed in them on
Yes.
day one goes a long way. They may not give up, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you're turned away on day one, you say, maybe it's not
Yes,
worth that.
yes. Like how your principal have trusted on your idea that back then in school, and that's how we have Nilay here, right? So
Correct.
it's somebody who is trusting on you.
Yeah. I mean, it's serendipity. So leaving it to serendipity to some extent helps, right? Like
Yeah.
something good might come out of it, right? Let's see.
And I'm glad that, institutions like we have REVA and we have many other enablers which are there to support you, not just the belief and trust. It's there to support you in every way in terms of the resources, infra, mentorship, guidance. And I feel that's a great support to the innovators, thinkers to, think free towards the kind of solutions which you have provided, right? So I want to understand, we have been talking about AI a lot, and you are the right person to talk about that, about your ventures, with AI, which is pretty fascinating venture you have created, Nilay. Can you tell us more about how the generative AI is transforming the financial research side and the unique values which your tool is bringing to the industry here through with AI?
So it's an interesting journey how that happened, because I've been a passionate, avid investor in the stock markets ever since I started making any amount of money. The
And
first
since
thing,
which age?
about 16, right, was the first few rupees that I made. Whatever. And the first thing I did is to create a Zerodha account in my mom's name so that I can invest. And but I mean,
Sorry to interrupt here.
Sorry.
Like, who encouraged you to do this?
Nothing. I was just curious. I said,
it was
"Arey,
just there."
how fascinating! I can own a part of a company.
Well,
like,
that's a
how
pretty
cool is that,
interesting
right?
part.
It's a share, no?"
Yeah.
So I said, it was out of fascination. But I said, you could buy it at a certain price. You can sell. There's ways to win from this. So I just wanted to see my money grow, essentially, right? I was 16. I said, if I have 50,000 today, what if it becomes? I mean, then I can, I don't know, I can buy more servers or something. I don't know.
Okay.
But my parents are CAs, so I sat with them and I insisted that they teach me at least basics of how do I understand if it's a good company or not. Okay, what do I do to make sense of this? What's a good company? What's a bad company? So then they taught me some basic, how do you read a P&L statement, a balance sheet, and so on and so forth. And over the years, my process of research kept evolving, and I kept wanting to do more with data that was unstructured, because I always found that, reading some very obscure news article or, noticing something that the management commented in a shareholders meeting or a call had certain signals that you could have bet on a few months ahead of what happened with the company. So I said, but for the longest time, we didn't have the ability to make sense of words. And I think the biggest moment came with embeddings and these language models, right? The Gen AI sort of Gen AI. So not all language models are generative, right? So a lot of what we build at Vitt AI or on our product is more they're language models. They have language understanding. They also have accounting understanding, but they're not generative in nature. Like they're not like chat bots that display a lot of text,
Right.
but they help within the system break down and make sense of, when a company manager is making a claim on a call, it is able to organize this information saying, oh, if we claim 15% growth in a company, in say production capacity in our manufacturing plant, quarter on quarter, the system is able to go back and say, look, 5 years ago a similar claim was made by a company, but it's kind of unprecedented to have this kind of growth rate within a certain macro and micro economic scenario. The last time the same company, when they claimed, I don't know, 12%, it turned out to be 8. The point is not to give advice, but to enable investors with a rich, well-informed this thing set of like a data points, right? And so, I mean, Narad, or like our products is called Narad because we've, we started with conversational data. So we listens to
So
everything that's happening.
Narad.
Narad, right? That's our product.
Interesting.
So because it's listening to everything that's happening in the markets. So, podcast, news, keynote speeches, shareholder meetings, etc. So, there, I think what we try to, what we've been able to do is like leverage AIs or these machines' ability to make sense of words now. Being able to do calculations with them is a pretty fascinating leap. And so the under the hood, how these language models work is something called embedding. So that's the process of taking a word and making a numerical representation of it. So, I mean, I'll give you a very short example. There was a paper that came out that word to vector, right? Word to numerical representation, where they were able to demonstrate that you could take a word like king and say, and these are numbers. So when I say word king, it's a numerical version of king. So let's say it says 7, 2, whatever. It's a number. So you say king number minus man number plus woman number, and when you do an equal to whatever, right, the resultant number is very close to the numerical or the vector of queen. So king minus man plus woman equals queen. So you are able to do something called word algebra.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Leverage. See, this is when this is the first moment when machines were able to make sense, or we were able to use machines to do a lot of large scale, correlation and analysis reasonably well since 2020, 21, since ChatGPT came out, right? And the embedding models that power these this thing under the hood, right? So that moment is where I think we were sort of inclined to build this. I wanted to do this for a long time. So I said, this is the right, now I have the right tools, the right technology to be able to do this.
Contribute towards this, right?
Correct.
Talk about this in the similar line, generative AI and its potential towards the, institution level, like with REVA initiatives in AI education. So what skill do you think that these are essential for the students to excel in this field?
This is very interesting. See, I think language models that we have today are very good at knowledge-based tasks. They have read the entire internet essentially, right? So if you ask it to, you ask Claude or ChatGPT about a certain fact or a concept in physics, right? It will be able to reproduce what is conventionally known reasonably well. It can do that very well. I think reasoning tasks is where we are still yet to crack the code. We don't really, no one really, I think, knows realistically what the timeline looks like. But what humans excel at, and we're still getting trying to get machines to do that, is what we call long horizon reasoning. So let's say things like, riddles, like, if I had 6 apples and then I gave three to George, and then George also sold them on the. So when you try to do long chain of such events, the number of reasonings or computations that you have to do increase. Okay, and the models sometimes are perplexed, or they're sometimes not able to reason very well. So it might recently we had the O3 breakthrough where they were it was able to crack reasoning some reasoning benchmarks fairly well. Now the reason why I say this is if we understand what these models are good at and what these models are specifically not good at, we are better informed on how to use them.
Okay.
If you are aware that a hammer cannot be used to repair a puncture, you won't use it. You don't want to use these models on tasks that they're not good at. Because see, the reason I say this is it's very clear to anyone that a hammer is not good at repairing a puncture. Okay, but it's not that obvious when it comes to language models, because even if you ask them something, they will produce a response.
Similar
so it doesn't look like failure.
Okay.
It doesn't look like the tool is failing, but it might throw you off a wild goose chase, right? So that is why I think a good friend of mine, Ishan, he recently talked about and wrote about this on how to use leverage Gen AI. This thing, there's prompt engineering guide, and there's few things like that. That there's a website called promptengineeringguide.com, which is an excellent source to learn how do I prompt this model well. But it's important for you to know which tasks I can assign it and which tasks I currently can't do with it. Another thing, while building while building technology projects, etc., what's happened is before ChatGPT era, what used to happen is you could get, without any AI expertise, you could, let's say, get from 0 to 40% of your ideal solution. Okay. And after which, let's say you had to invest in AI resources, etc. You had to have some kind of this thing. Now what has happened is you can get up to a 75% or an 80% point without having, by just leveraging tools and models that currently are there, right? Like for example, image classification used to be, you used to need to train a model that is able to recognize whether this is the picture given contains an animal, contains a human or not. You needed someone who understood AI. Today you don't need, it's an API call away. So it's now far more accessible. So I think so between this 40% and 80% gap, right, which is now unlocked. It's like a new level has been unlocked. There's a lot of, it's a huge playground. So a lot of very interesting opportunities have been unlocked, right? So a lot of teams that might have been dissuaded, thinking that, I'll have to train an AI model, play around, maybe, spend a couple of hours on tools like Hugging Face, or, just play around, plug and play on a few models with your specific problem. Maybe it's an already solved problem. Maybe it's not that far away. Maybe you say, okay, I need to train a model on a certain data set, but oh my God, I don't have the data set. Let's say a two-wheeler recognition model.
Okay.
Maybe the data set is already out there on somewhere on Kaggle or somewhere on this thing, Hugging Face, right? Go around and discover. Maybe a little bit of playing around and investing slightly in the discovery phase might save you months of efforts in trying to build the model yourself, building the data set yourself, and so on, right? So the example I give is like we all benefit or leverage this amazing technology called electricity. 110 years ago, it was revolutionary. Still, we have places that don't have electricity, and there's a huge difference in the progress that those societies. One of an interesting economic indicator of the development of a country is how electrified the country is, right? Now, the point is, we are all leveraging electricity, we are benefiting from it. Did we all become electrical engineers? Did we all need to? Right? No, right? I mean, you leverage electronics, you don't need to be an electronic engineer or whatnot, right?
Being an end user is very different than,
so
working
so you don't need to be the tool builder always, right? So I don't say that everyone working in tech should now start building their own models or start learning PyTorch, start learning this, that. It's good to know if you're curious about it, but you could be an excellent tool user. There's still a lot of opportunities that have not been exploited. I think one notion that AI has now solved everything, AGI is here, oh my God, right? That's very much not true, at least today, right? I hope this does not age like milk. But the point is, there is still a lot of work to be done. Even with these models, right? You still need to guide it.
A lot to learn also. Even if you're an end user, you need to learn a lot, to use it efficiently. And
correct. I see. I'll leave you with this. Conclude this specific topic with this example that whenever you generate new text or you write new code. I find it akin to taking a stone sculptor, taking a fresh block of stone. It's a blank slate, right? Or a blank just a block. And then the task starts to remove and chip away at this and to reveal the sculpture, the beauty that is hidden inside the stone. I think models or generative AI has made it much easier to acquire these stones. It's like the stone mining is easier, but the sculpting is not, because what to remove is where a lot of magic happens, right? So a lot of times your model might give you, I mean, this is very, very much true for me. We write a lot of code using Gen AI, using Cursor and all of these tools, but a lot of times the editing is where that difference happens for us. So applying that reflection, applying that thought, and or even whatever brand communication or website content that we might put out, a lot of times the model gives good content. It gives us a fresh block to work with, but then we still have to chip away. You would this would resonate well with you, since you work with written content. You still need to edit it. The edit is the magical process, and
that's where the art is, like the human connection is. Often this question has been coming to us since December, since we are using ChatGPT and all, that whether AI is going to replace humans or not. I think you have answered it so well that you need to put that, you need to still carve that to bring out the sculpture from the stone, right? So AI is there to help you with the stones, and then it's your job to bring it so beautifully, right? Awesome. Nice. So I want to understand this perspective, Nilay. Like, you have worked on the global projects, like you have worked in Serbia, Israel, you have worked with the chatbots, right? So how this international exposure has influenced you on your work, on your vision so far?
I've been very fortunate to travel to such. I've traveled in the US a fair bit, but I also had the opportunity to go to these slightly lesser known or lesser traveled places like Serbia and Morocco and Spain. It's not like necessarily known for its technology, but due to conferences and so on, I had a chance to interact with people there. And I think it opened my eyes to different ways of looking at technology. I met people who I met engineers or technologists who make technology as art. Okay. So I said, there is a way to, I mean, it was a new finding for me that you don't always have to be a super utility focused person. You don't need to necessarily have that burden or pressure. You can make some beautiful art out of this, right?
Out of the technology.
Out of technology, right? I mean, for example, I built this project. I love flying kites. We recently had Makar Sankranti. I absolutely love flying kites. Growing up in Nashik, we have a big culture. So what I did is I put a bunch of motion sensors on a kite, right? I attached like a little board with it, and I sent the kite upwards, right? And I recorded the movement data I tracked, right? And then I took this data, I turned it, and I did some, number crunching, turned it into vectors and so on. And then I pushed this into a generative image generation model to see what the kite was painting on the sky. So I was trying to discover when the kite flies, it's not just about the shape, but it's the vigor, it's the intensity and so on.
Yeah.
So I said, if it dips very fast, then it should have slightly redder color, right, warmer color, and so on. So
Wow.
so I generated a little video out of it, some gifs and some
It's
images.
there, you've created?
I might have published it like a Notion note or
Okay,
something.
okay.
Then I said, can I put similar sensors on like classical dancers and see how their heart rate and movement throughout the performance, right? So let's say Bharatnatyam performers, and then you say, look at, as they are performing, their heart rate, their body temperature goes up, and the performance or movement also changes. And at the end of it, we generate an image that we print out and give to the audience, saying this is a once in a lifetime. Like even if the same performance is repeated, you will not have the same
not
piece,
be having the same.
right? So you have. So the thing is, I think if I had stayed here, only here, and I had a certain limited exposure, I think I wouldn't have. My mind wouldn't have been open to such possibilities. Saying, hey, what a stupid thing to talk about. What's the use of doing this? But realizing that some of these things help us realize how beautiful some of these little moments
Yeah.
are,
Yeah.
right? A dance performance is also a visual performance, right? The kite is also painting, it's also singing, it's also probably writing poetry. I don't know.
It's actually opening a very different story in your mind, and then the altogether a different level of possibilities through this kind of vision and thinking.
So I mean, I think the international sort of exposure allowed me to see things differently. I mean, case in point, I worked on this Meditech device in Israel, right? And so it was a tongue sensor. It was a motion sensor, in like motion or whatever, like a touch sensor inside the mouth, like a mouth guard that boxers might use, right? And it allowed it analyzed tongue movements, and then you could do CAD modeling, Photoshop, very high resolution activities on a computer. But the first thing we built was the ability to play a guitar using only the tongue. This is for paraplegic people, or people who have lost motor control over their hands or their feet even. But tongue control is often maintained, right? And we thought it might be slightly easier than eye tracking, because calibration is difficult with eye tracking. So with this, right, I was very touched and happy to see that my collaborators prioritized the playing of the guitar first, because a lot of times accessibility projects are focused on mobility. How do I move a wheelchair? We eventually built a wheelchair function, but self-expression, being able to play music, being able to express yourself is often overlooked when it comes to accessibility, right?
Yeah.
So, and how, I mean, how could you, you can't imagine your ability to express, you take it for granted, right?
Yes.
To be understood, to be able to, this thing, right?
And we often not give any importance to that as well.
You may not be very, but someone who doesn't have the same functions as you, it might be a huge availability, right?
Yes.
So I mean, it's kind of, that's where the sensibility around technology, it's about the perspective. I think my travels helped me shape some of those.
So, REVA University actively collaborates with global institutions, So when we are talking about the global exposure, so what advice would you give to offer on building the meaningful international partnership?
Again, as I said, right, like let's support some multidisciplinary projects, right? Like it is, sure, I mean, technology is a very, I think it's a very inert, or it's a very neutral sort of a field, okay? You could be a technologist that works in arts or music. I mean, arts of a specific kind. It could be art documentation, to specifics like sound engineering and things like that, to then working on pure play software and this generative AI, and you could be in food tech and all. So technology itself is very inert, okay? And I think new fresh ideas come from interactions with non-correlated fields. So I think more musicians need to talk to technologists, more technologists need to talk to philosophers, more cross multidisciplinary projects need to happen to form perspectives that are outside of your enterprise SaaS. This I'm not saying there's anything wrong. I am building an enterprise SaaS-ish AI company, right? But I think to explore, especially at a college level, it's important to form a more diverse and more multidisciplinary perspective. So I would want to strike partnerships with as a if I were operating a university, I would try to talk to more even technology and engineering, right? I would try to talk to more museums and maybe have artist collectives collaborate with us, or propose academic research or some actual collaborations. Maybe some commercial projects might come out of it that revolutionizes how artists train, or an excellent new instrument might come out of it. Some of my collaborators are people who build tech instruments. So they make someone made a glove that when based on your based on your motion, it changes music, it plays music, right?
That's
This
interesting.
is tech and music, because this person is also passionate about music. So having those outside of engineering to engineering communication, I
It's
think
a very cross collaboration, and that's how the magic happens. You come out of,
I
you
think
think
so.
out of the box, you do something out of the box.
I think so. I think that's an interesting direction.
That's an interesting perspective as well, Nilay. Also, when now that we are coming to the end of this conversation, I want to see, like, where do you see the big opportunities of tech innovations, especially in India?
Wow, this is such a large topic. I think it's very interesting that India, we often tend to leapfrog a lot of things. Like we didn't do cards, we straight up went to UPI, and now everyone wants our systems and so on. So I think there's very specific India specific challenges that we are. I mean, one of my friends, for example, runs this company. It's a smart calculator company. Okay. So they built this calculator that looks like your normal everyday calculator that your shopkeepers have,
Yes.
but it bakes in accounting and payments and all bookkeeping, like all of those good things within that.
So you don't need an
single
accountant?
account. You don't need a bookkeeping person. It's very easy. It can take whatever your cash balances, etc., so on. Now this is a problem that only exists in India, but the thing is, even if it's unique to our country, the country is so big that the challenge often ends up being a very interesting challenge, and like a lucrative money making opportunity as well, right? With the Kumbhathon initiative that we are doing in Nashik, I think a lot of very interesting problems are emerging, right? It could be about I think we so for example, one of the startups that I saw, Panful, they do like Panful, they rent plant this thing, right? Plants to office spaces for decoration. There's people who are doing VR sort of exhibitions of what do you call it, temples. So a better branding or a better storytelling for our temples, and I think some of these things are needed for a better branding. I went to Japan recently, and I saw that the way the country communicates its heritage is very, very elegant, and it's very accessible to a foreign traveler, and I think that doesn't exist in India as much, right? So I mean, it could be our heritage sites, it could be our traditions, cultures, what kind of dance forms, art forms we have, etc., right? Having experiences and having sort of what do you call them, having initiatives that highlight or communicate or brand our country better, right? Also has it's unique opportunities, it's unique this thing. I mean, with the Gen AI model that we're doing, we could do 3D prints of the restored sculptures and sell them as merchandise, right? There's a bunch of ways that you can frame this and think about, right? So, I mean, being curious about the challenges around you and connecting with your fellow Indians would open your eyes to what lies out there, what you could be building for, and I think it's a fairly large playground. From state to state, you have different cultures, different challenges, etc. I encourage people to venture out and talk to more people, maybe do backpacking trips and so on, to understand, hey, you know what, I see I don't know, very, very specific agriculture. I mean, Nashik, for example, our entire ecosystem is agri-tech, right? Like startup ecosystem I'm talking about, right? There's so specific challenges around the supply chain, and, someone is working on a stem borer detection algorithm and so on. There's very, very specific challenges that could also have global implications. But, the whole build local, think global, I think is a right. So I encourage people to engage with their ecosystem and get outside of your whatever your hacking labs and colleges. Just be out there, right? Like, experience the world. Yeah.
So what is your advice to the young innovators?
How young are we talking?
Okay, you're the youngest.
No. College students.
To the college students.
See, again, right? Like, try to. Don't try to. First, I mean, if you're a technologist, keep building projects, play around, but at the same time, like, don't feel obligated to only have one interest. Don't feel obligated to say that, since I'm doing software, I should only be consuming software content and so on. Right? Try to have fun. Pursue your hobbies, play the guitar, whatever. You travel, backpack, and interact with people that are unlike you. Try to talk to people who don't. Try to have conversations, at least one conversation a week or a month, where you are talking to someone who works in an area that you know nothing about.
Yes.
If you're a software person, talk to a chemical engineer, okay? And I mean, like or a fertilizer company, or talk to a CA. Try to understand what life looks like for them. Talk to your
artists.
You talk to artists, talk to people around you, gather perspectives. So it could be through books, through people is the best. Right, but through whatever means, gather perspectives. It's at a younger age, don't be too worried about solving for the world. I mean, sure, that,
as you said, impact.
Right, it will emerge. Don't feel pressurized to figure out the next Google, the next Apple. Don't like. I mean, there's a lot of very ambitious folks, right? You feel very burdened. Oh, this is such the challenge. It looks so overwhelming.
Yeah.
How will I? But don't be too worried about being the next next whatever, right? You
look impactful and feel impactful.
Yeah, I mean, focus inward. A lot of problems go away when you look inside. Follow what you like, and you will figure out, if you're creating something of value, you will be able to make some amount of money. So as long as you're able to sustain that and keep pursuing these these interests, some very interesting things might emerge. Your specific niche area of interest might turn into like the next this thing, right? I mean, GPUs, Jensen Huang really bet on GPUs when the world said, it wasn't very intuitive that these graphics processing cards that are used in computer graphics and games, etc., would be the next big deal for AI, right? So in hindsight, some of these bigger things look like they were obvious choices, but at that time the person was probably just pursuing a very specific passion. Linux as an operating system emerged out of Linus Torvalds. Just wanting to get outside of the, I think, the ecosystem, the closed ecosystem for operating systems that existed at that time. Right? It had a huge impact. Everything runs on Linux today,
Yes.
all servers and so on. So don't feel pressurized to solve for the world. If if you create something of value even within your own area, as a technologist, try to combine it with whatever else you like, and therefore have other things that you like. Right? Don't I mean, sure, if you want to get into research, stick to only tech, whatever it is. I mean, even then it kind of gets boring after a while, right? Like, even with research, having certain kinds of projects that you have a likeness for is helpful. So gathering perspective is more important. Playing around and so on, these are all tools. Okay, your projects are tools. They're means to an end.
Yes.
The end is to enrich yourself to become better than who you were yesterday.
Yes. Yes. So it's important to stick to your why, how, and also keep disconnecting yourself and do something else to gather more perspective and keep doing the things, right? So I think we had an interesting conversation, Nilay, through, the last 1 hour was just, I have gone through with the tech to innovation to art to, through your journey, AI, we have spoke about the global perspective. And I felt this was a wholesome conversation through you, and we have actually brought your perspective through this podcast, and it was amazing to know what's in it in your mind, the 14-year-old Nilay to 24-year-old Nilay today. So thank you for bringing all those perspective here in this podcast, and thank you for being here. It was nice talking to you.
I really loved this conversation. Thank you for entertaining my ramblings, and I hope some of this people might find useful. The idea is not of giving any advice, to be honest. I mean, you've asked for what would you advise people, but a lot of times it's just may it be entrepreneurship, technology, it's a sadhana. Okay, and as a sadhak, as a practitioner, these are some of the things that I've observed that I would apply today. So I'm just sharing what I've seen, and in my limited capacity to understand things, this is what I had to say. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to voice these, and I had a lovely conversation. You're a really great host. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nilay. And we really had a lot of outcomes from this conversation, and I'm sure it is going to help our audience with a lot of inspiration, a lot of stories, and a lot of things to, ponder upon. You left us with, a lot of things to think upon, and I'm sure our young innovators, they are going to get a lot of inspiration through this. So thank you so much. Thank you for watching REVA Podcast Series. Thank you.